Hi there and welcome back. I'm sorry that it's been a while since I've shared a video. Well, today I definitely have an episode for you. This is a longer video, but I am sharing a ton of card examples and a bunch of random die cutting tips. Now, die cutting is definitely my favorite thing with crafting. I like it even more than stamping, believe it or not, especially when I have fantastic intricate dies that I can get really clever with. So in today's video, I'm focusing on some new dies from Birch Press. I had to buy them all because I think they are just so much fun to use. Now I will say these layering dies do have a higher price point since there are multiple dies sold together. However, I find that they are worth the investment for me since I use them so often, and I can make cards quickly with them since they provide so much detail and interest. However, today's techniques, many of them can be used with regular dies, in other words, dies that don't layer, or you can layer die cuts that you may already have. So I'm hoping that you'll find some useful information as I randomly make a bunch of cards using these fun new products. Now, along with these layering dies from Birch Press, I am also using some new word dies that they've released. These are all the sugar script die style. So there are a bunch of words and I really like the style of these dies. Now there are some smaller word dies like the ones I'm showing you here. Then they also have some bigger versions that also come with the shadow die. So it cuts the word and the shadow, and those are the ones that you see here. So there are many words available in these two sizes, and I will also be featuring these throughout the video since they work so well on top of the layering dies that provide a lot of detail. But keep in mind, you can use any dies that you may have, and I'm going to team up these dies with sentiments that I find in my stash. Now I did all of the die cutting for today's video with the Gemini Junior die cut machine. I chose this machine for two reasons. One is it cuts intricate dies beautifully. I've never had a problem. Cuts it completely through. And also it is an auto feed machine. When you put the plates in it, you can just let it go and it cuts itself. So while it's die cutting, I can go ahead and get ready for the next step. And that saves me a lot of time when I'm doing a lot of die cutting. I did check these dies with my Big Shot Express, and the Big Shot Express does cut them beautifully as long as I used a metal adapter plate. You can see that I did die cutting using lots of cardstock scraps that I had saved. It's a good way to put them to use. And I used purple tape to hold the die onto the cardstock so it doesn't shift when I'm die cutting. And I used the Tim Holtz craft pick to help get the die cuts out of the dies. Those are two tools that I really like for die cutting. Now, if you have little pieces left over from intricate dies such as the ones I'm using today, one helpful tip is to use a lint roller to pick up those tiny little pieces, especially the ones that tend to stick to your cutting plates after you do your die cutting. Now, sometimes I do keep those tiny little pieces to put in shaker box windows or use as accents. But if I'm just looking to get rid of them, I use the lint roller to pick them up off my desk or out of the die, or you can use a little handheld vacuum. Now I also do like to use the lint roller to pull little pieces out of my die cuts if they get stuck in that too. It's just a handy tool to have. Okay, so now that I've shown you some of the basic tips, let's get into a bunch of ways to kind of stretch your dies or use them creatively. I first am going to start with a basic card where I use some of the new Birch Press layering dies. These are unique because there are sold 3 together. They're circles, and you can see that there's a circle on the inside of the die too. So it actually cuts a smaller circle and a ring, and they fit together nicely. You can use these dies separately or together, and you can see how intricate the pieces are. There are many layering dies out there now, so these techniques could work with any of them that you may have. I was really excited about these particular ones today because you can interchange the centers of these between different die sets, as you'll see a little bit later. Now, since Birch Press came out with so many different layering dies in the same shape, they also came out with a circle base and a frame base. These are just helpful if you want to have kind of a backing for your die cuts. You could create your own by tracing it or cutting it but this is handy to have if you do intend to do a bunch of cards like I do today. So you can see here I cut a bunch of different die cuts using that same die set, but from a bunch of different colors of cardstock. So I can create several cards from these. Now in layering die cuts like this, I have found over the years that my favorite way to adhere them together is with Gina Connect Adhesive. This is a strong liquid adhesive that dries pretty quickly, comes out super easily from the bottle. You can get tiny amounts to come out, which is all you need, and it doesn't get clogged. I searched for a long time and I'm really happy with this adhesive, and that's what I used on almost all of my cards today. I just put tiny little dots of the adhesive in different places on the back. Then I put something heavy over it, like an acrylic block, to hold it in place as it dries, and it doesn't take too long. And by the way, this adhesive does dry clear, so if a little bit gets outside of the die cut, you won't see it. Now, I also use this same adhesive to add my little gems and sequins to my projects too, so it can be used for many things. For most of my cards, I added my die cut shapes onto a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch white note card. Now for the center, I put some foam tape behind it so it would stand up a little bit, and there you can see a beautiful rainbow die cut arrangement. For the sentiment, I used the Birch Press Thanks Sugar Script die that you see on the left, along with a little sentiment from the Birch Press Just Because stamp set. This is one that's been out for a while and I've used in many videos, and I thought the For Your Friendship message worked nice with the thanks die cut. Now that thanks die cut is stacked, so I die cut 3 of the thanks die cuts from white cardstock, glued them together, and then I added it to my card. I again used the Gina Connect glue because that's strong and I can be sure that it'll stay secure. So there's the completed card, and you can see that with die cuts kind of as a backdrop for your focal sentiment, you don't need to spend much time creating your card. The die cuts do the work for you. I also wanted to show you the stamp set that I used to decorate today's envelopes. It's from the Ink Road Stamps called I Made a Thing stamp set. It has some basic handmade by and delivered to sentiments that work great for envelopes and back of cards. But then there are some funny ones that I really like. One says, by opening this item, you have hereby agreed to keep it forever, which is great on envelopes. And then for the back of the cards, there's one that says, Card Tracker will notify me if thrown in trash. And I thought those were really unique and fun to add to today's cards. Okay, my next card uses another one of the layered pieces that I created a few moments ago, but this time around a window. So I have a note card here, and I'm just going to place a circle die towards the top center of the card, and I'll tape it in place and run it through my die cut machine. This will cut a circular window on the front of our card. I'll then use strong liquid adhesive to add that die cut ring right around our window. So what we'll end up with is a really intricate fancy frame around our window. Now in the center of this, I'll use a sentiment that I've been dying to use for a while. It's from an older stamp set. Using dies and creating cards with die cutting is a great way to create something beautiful that you can just add a favorite sentiment to. Here I'm adding Lucy's Cards gems or jewels to the die cut to add some fun. I'm using a jewel picker. Now I love my jewel picker. It's just enough stick to pick up the gems and put it onto the adhesive. If you find that yours is losing its stick, just touch it to a baby wipe or a wet cloth, and I'll give it just enough stick to add those gems onto your card. I also use the Gina Connect to add those gems, by the way. So again, the sentiment is one that I've been wanting to use. It is from this Memory Box Spring Lilacs stamp set. I just thought the sentiment was sweet and it fits perfectly in the center of that little window. Okay, my next example uses the last layered die cut piece we have. Now this one, I also impressed the die around it for a dry embossed look. This is a great way to get more out of any die that you may have. All you do is you tape the die onto your cardstock, then you run it through your die cut machine with an embossing mat, such as this one from Spellbinders. Now you can do this with any die cut machine you may have, and you just need to read the manual of your die cut machine to figure out what sandwich to do with that embossing mat. The embossing mat allows the die to make an impression into the paper instead of cutting through it. Here you can see how beautiful that is. It kind of gives a little focal point to that center. It's a great way to kind of add a little bit of interest without taking too much time. Now the sentiment in the middle there is this You're the Greatest from an older Birch Press stamp set. I reach for this stamp set often because I like all those little sentiments there on the bottom. Okay, my next card uses a different Birch Press layer die set. This is the Dazzler set. You can see there are 3 dies that layer together beautifully. But for my example, I'm actually only going to use the layer A die. I die cut that layer A die from 4 different colors of cardstock, and I'm going to layer them on top of each other, slightly offset, to get a completely different look. Now to do this, I again am using my strong liquid adhesive, and you'll see when I layer them together, I just kind of offset it a little bit and press that down. Now I've done this before with heart dies, with star dies. I encourage you to look at any die you may have and see if you can get a new look from it by layering them together with a little bit of an offset. Okay, so once I was done with that, I added the Sugar Script Kindness die from Birch Press, and that's a black die cut. I'm covering it with some Tonic Aqua Shimmer pen. This just makes it nice and sparkly. Then I'm going to coat that with some Tonic Crystal Glaze. I love doing this technique, especially on black cardstock, because it makes it sparkly and shiny and gives it rounded, beautiful dimension. When I put the Tonic Crystal Glaze down, it really blends or kind of smooths out very easily. It comes out of the bottle very easily. So I just put it on the heavier areas of the die cut and then use my craft knife to kind of spread it into the thinner areas. I like how this results in kind of like a sparkly, puffy sticker. It's really cool looking. Above and below the kindness sentiment, I added some stamped images from the Birch Pressed Just Because stamp set. You can tell this is a stamp set that I've used many times and have in previous videos also. I like how you can build it together with word dies to create new sentiments. And the main sentiment word kindness that I used is the Birch Press Sugar Script Kindness die. Okay, so my next example shares the idea of using specialty papers along with your die cuts. Many specialty papers out there cut beautifully with dies, such as glitter paper, wood paper, and more. For this example, I'm using the Birch Press Addy layer dies. This is a really fun one in that the top layer doesn't have the separate middle piece. The bottom layers do, and you glue those separate middle pieces behind the top layer, as you can see me doing here. On my example, I'm actually using a specialty paper, a glitter cardstock, and I'm just backing it behind this layer die cut so that it shows through. But I will say that you can use these intricate dies to cut this glitter paper. This is the Simon Says Stamp glitter paper pack. It comes in packs of solid colors, or you can get a mix pack like I'm showing here. I decided to use this silver glitter paper, and I'm gluing my layered die cut on the top. And once that's dry, I'm just going to use my scissors to cut around the outside. But as I mentioned, you can use these intricate dies to cut this particular glitter paper. It cuts beautifully and glitter does not rub off of it. The nice thing about an elaborate layered die cut like this is that all you have to do is throw it on a card and add a sentiment, so it doesn't take much time. If you don't have a layering die set like this, just layer any kind of die cuts that you may have and use some specialty paper to add some interest. That Hello die cut is from the Birch Press Sugar Script Hello. It's the smaller one. And I did a matching envelope with the Ink Road stamp set that I showed you earlier. Now another example using specialty paper is this Hugs card. So I used the same Addy layer die set and added that to a 4 1/4 by 4 1/4 pool note card that I created. In the center, I used the larger Hugs script die. I cut the word Hugs from the same glitter cardstock and backed it with a white shadow die cut. So remember, with your die cutting, you can use specialty papers and get beautiful looks. Okay, this next example suggests to use your little bits and pieces that you have left over from die cutting and actually use those on the card instead of the die cuts themselves. For this example, I'm using the Birch Press Viva layer die set. You can see the pieces that each of the dies cut. And by the way, these dies are sold together. So there you can see what the layering looks like. It's just beautiful. And remember, you can switch out these circle pieces with some of the other layering die sets from Birch Press, since they have the same size circles. So here's an example of that. I took a die cut from one of the other sets and put it in the middle. You can mix and match these. Now for this technique, it's the only card that I used a different type of adhesive. For this one, I'm using the Couture Creations double-sided adhesive. So I cut a piece of this, and I'm going to put this on the back of some cardstock. This is just a cardstock scrap, and I'll trim off the excess. I'm using my bone folder to make sure that adhesive is really stuck to that cardstock. Now I'm going to run that through my die cut machine, and what I end up with is a die cut with adhesive already on the back. Since this is a thicker adhesive, the backing doesn't cut all the way through, which is great because then you end up with what's like a sticker sheet. So I'm using one of the die cuts and I'm just taping it temporarily onto a card. And this will be a guide for me to position all those little bits and pieces in the openings. So using a craft knife, I'm just picking up each of the little pieces and popping them in place. Just kind of comes together like a puzzle and they pop in place nicely. And since the adhesive is already on the back of these, it's very easy to do. So you can see how easily it peels off, and I can arrange all the pieces in their place. After I've done the bottom layer, I use my bone folder to really press it into place. Then I remove the guide die cut, and there we have all those little bits and pieces adhered to our card. And it looks so cool. It looks like I positioned each of those myself, but really I used the negative space die cut to give me a guide on where to position them. Now I'm coming in with the next layer and adding those pieces on top too. I had adhesive on the back of them already, so they pop into place nicely. Once I'm done, I press them all down with my bone folder, and there we have what looks like a really elaborate card, but thanks to that adhesive already being on the back of the die cuts, it doesn't take long at all. Now for this sentiment, I used the Kindness Sugar Script die. I die cut 3 of them from black cardstock and glued them together for a stacked look. And over the top, I used an Aqua Shimmer pen and some Tonic crystal glaze, as I showed you earlier, so that it has some dimension. Now for the message Kindness and Kisses, which I thought was something just a little bit fun and different, I got the And Kisses from the same Birch Press Just Because stamp set. So keep in mind, you can keep all those tiny little bits and pieces left over from intricate die cuts and add them onto your card like this, or even use them in a shaker card or simple accents. Okay, so next I'm going to be using the Birch Press Bali layer die set. This is one of my favorites. I just like the floral shape of it. And remember, the circles in this can be interchanged with the other die sets that I've showed you. And for this one, I thought I would create kind of an enamel look. So here are the 2 examples that I created. I glued the layer die cuts together, so we have the ring and then the center circle. And I'm going to press my VersaMark ink pad directly onto these pieces. I'm then adding clear embossing powder, and I'll heat set that. And this gives it a nice shine. Now keep in mind, clear embossing powder makes your cardstock a little bit darker, so it'll take those soft colors of cardstock and make them a little more vibrant. So after I have heat set this first layer of clear embossing, I'm going to add another layer. So you need to let it cool completely and then repeat the process. So press VersaMark ink on it again and add some more clear embossing powder. And I did 4 layers of that. If you have ultra thick heat enamel or any kind of ultra thick embossing powder, you could instead just do 1 coat of that. You could also just cover your die cuts with a clear glaze like the Tonic crystal glaze that I showed you, but I find you get better even results by doing the layers of clear embossing. Now around that ring piece, I used the Birch Press Grace layer dies. That's that background layered dies that you see, and I'll show you that a little bit more later in this video. In the center, I used this Senging Sugar Script die, along with a little prayers sentiment from this Poppy Stamps Sending Scribbles stamp set. It's an older set that, again, I really like the sentiments on. So I white heat embossed the prayers underneath the sending. Again, this is a good example of combining your word dies with stamp sentiments. Now this is a mini card. This one is 3.5 by 5 inches. I used just that center piece. You can see the lovely shine that you get with the clear embossing. And I just put a simple Here For You Always sentiment that's silver heat embossed from the Birch Press Dragonfly Greeting stamp set. I used this one earlier and will be using it again. Since I really like the look of covering die cuts with clear embossing, I thought I'd show another example. This one uses the Birch Press Dazzler layer dies. I used that one earlier in this video. And I layered some yellow and orange die cuts together, and then I covered it with 4 layers of clear embossing. Now this sending, I did the same thing. That's just an orange die cut covered with 4 layers of clear embossing. So you could either use like a liquid clear product, such as the Tonic Crystal Glaze, on your word dies, or you can use a few layers of embossing powder. I really like how happy this one is, and that the shine kind of lends into that sending sunshine sentiment. Now that sending is the sugar script large sending message, so you can see I have a little vellum shadow die cut right behind the word. And I looked through my stamp stash to find the word sunshine to put underneath it, and I found it in this Altenew Quilled Elegance stamp set that I've had for a while. And so remember, you can give your die cuts an extra special look by covering with layers of clear embossing, and I'll link here to a video where I did this technique with some other examples. Okay, next I'm using the Birch Press Kaleidoscope layer die set. This one is circular, but the center has like these star shapes that you can definitely switch out and use with the Dazzler set that I showed you earlier. For this example, I'm covering my die cuts with watercolor, and instead of watercoloring all the layers, I glued them together first and then added the watercolor. So I have my layered dies glued together here. These are cut from watercolor paper. Now you could add any watercolor medium on here. You could even use some distress inks with an ink blending tool. Just put down some color very quickly. I decided to use the Arteza Real Brush watercolor pens to quickly scribble color on. Now I'll tell you that this was inspired by the cover of this book here that you see from Amy Tangerine. It's called Craft a Life You Love. This is a really cool book to kind of help you keep your creative mojo going. It's a workbook that's incredible, and I highly recommend it. And I thought that cover was so inspiring that that's where I came up with this idea. Once I put all of the color down onto the watercolor die cuts, I sprayed it generously with water and let it dry. That helps to blend the colors together. Once it was dry, I added a layer of Tsukineko Shimmer Spritz so that I would have a shimmery watercolor look to the die cuts. And it ends up beautiful and looks a lot like the book cover that I just showed you. So here is the completed card. I glued them onto a white note card and added a stacked Hugs white die cut on top. And the shadow for the Hugs die cut is made of vellum. And this is the Birch Press Big Hugs Sugar Script die set. So think about whatever dies you have. You could cover them with watercolor. You can cover them with markers, inking, anything you want to add some beautiful color. Okay, my next example shows a border layer die. Now for this one, I'll show you how to add little bits of shine into the openings of your die cuts. For this card, I used the Birch Press Kessa Arch Layer die set. There are 3 border dies in this one. The bottom layer I die cut from the front of a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch white note card. I'm covering the front of the note card with adhesive, and then I'm adding the next layer die on. You can see I just cut that from some peach cardstock. So I'll line the border up, press it down, and then flip the card over and trim off the excess. I can save these extra pieces for some die cut sentiments that I'll use later on. Now it's time for the 3rd layer, so I'll repeat the process. I put some tape runner down on the card itself, and then some of the strong liquid adhesive dots on the intricate parts of the die cut, so they stay glued down too. After I've pressed that down onto the note card, I can trim the excess off again. Now here's another fun tip that you can do with your word dies. Instead of putting them on your card straight, you can kind of arch them as you glue them down. That way the thanks die cut kind of arches along the arch of the border die. It really kind of helps with the flow of the card. So you can always change how you glue your word dies down. Here I'm using some Nuvo drops, just clear, to fill in those tiny little holes in the border die cut. That adds a little bit of shine and kind of gives a stained glass look. It's more effective when you use it in larger openings, but I just wanted to fill some of those tiny openings on this border die cut. I put a piece of gray cardstock on the inside of the card so that peeks through the front. And there we have the final card, which really took very little time to put together, and it's all made with die cutting, no stamping used. I find die cut cards definitely take less time than stamp cards for me. Now, if you are a stamper, you can use your die cuts to create your own stamps, as I'll do for this card. This card features the Birch Press Sparkler Butterfly Layer dies. Now, there are 4 dies in here. You have the 3 intricate butterfly dies, and then a solid one to back it up. And look how beautiful that layered butterfly is. Well, for my example, I cut these layer dies from white craft foam. This is the same craft foam that I use to add dimension to my cards. Well, it's great for die cutting. It die cuts beautifully. And then you can stamp with these foam die cuts. So I just put a little bit of adhesive on the back of the foam die cut and added it to my acrylic block. And then I'm inking it up with dye ink, and I'll just stamp it onto my card, and it stamps beautifully. Now, since this is a layered die set, I'm going to end up with a layered stamp look. So here's the next layer. I'll put it on my acrylic block, ink it up with a slightly darker ink, stamp it right on top, and we're going to end up with a beautiful layered butterfly. This is excellent if you like to stamp and if you like one-layer cards, because you can use any of your dies to create stamps from craft foam. I can't think of a better way to stretch your dies to get a new look. For the sentiment, I reached for that Birch Press Dragonfly greeting stamp once again. And then I added a few pearls and also stamped a few more smaller butterflies. Those smaller butterflies I cut with foam from these butterfly background dies. These are the background dies, the Birch Press Butterfly Garden Layer dies. These are 3 large dies. They cut 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and they are beautiful. Now, background die sets like this are expensive because these dies are large and expensive to make. But I find them worth the investment because I use them so much. So here are the 3 die cuts that you get from the layer dies. The bottom layer even adds some faux stitching so that you could use that die alone if you wanted to. But look how beautiful they are layered together. So I have a couple examples using this background die, and I'm just going to show you the final results. For this one, I cut the 3 layers with white cardstock, and I added it to a white note card. And I love the detail of that background. Now, those little blue butterfly accents, I actually cut with this background die too, and I just used some of the bits and pieces and assembled them together. Now for the wish sentiment, that is from the Birch Press Wishing Sugar Script die. I changed the greeting from wishing to wish simply by trimming it shorter. That's another great way to get more out of your word dies. I die cut it from silver glitter cardstock so it would stand out a little bit. Here's another one that I created with those butterfly background dies. Very simple. I used different shades of pool colored cardstock and glued them together on a note card. Then I did a simple just because die cut sentiment. And I stacked 3 together just to give it a bit of dimension. I then added 1 single white butterfly that I'd left over from the previous card. I like cards like this because I can use it for many different occasions and have it ready to go. Okay, I have one more butterfly card for you. For the background on this one, I only used 1 layer of the background dies. I put foam tape on the back of it, and I'm adding it onto a note card. Even though both of these pieces are white, that added bit of dimension between them creates a beautiful shadow. Really like the look of that background. For the focal point of this card, I wanted a rainbow layered butterfly, but I couldn't find the right size and color of cardstock. So instead, I die cut all the layers from white cardstock, and I'm coloring them quickly with my Copic markers. Now you could color your own die cuts with whatever medium you want. You can use markers, paint, ink, anything. And this way you can get the exact colors you want. White cardstock is often less expensive than colored cardstock also, so this can be a bit of a cost savings too. So here is the final card. You can see that background die cut added with the foam tape, and then the colored layered die cuts in the center. I added the Hello Sugar Script die cut in the middle, also from white cardstock, so that the focus is on that bright butterfly. Okay, next I'm using probably my favorite of the layered dies in this release, and this is the Birch Press Grace Layered Die Set. These are 3 large dies that are 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and you can see it cuts the ring in the main center circle like the other dies that we've been using, so you can use them interchangeably. So here you can see the Grace background die with one of the other dies earlier in the video. Now for this card, I was kind of trying to come up with new color combinations. So I used some new colors of cardstock from Gina K. She has my favorite cardstock. They're beautiful colors, and I thought these new colors were really unique together. So my next few card examples use this color combination. You can see how these dies create lots of pieces that can be put together in many different ways. My first card using these layered die cuts is very simple. I used a 4 1/2 by 4 1/2 inch craft note card. I really like bold color combinations like this on a craft background. And the sentiment is just a white die cut Celebrate. Very simple design and can be used for many occasions. Next, I wanted to create another card using the same colors of cardstock layered together, but change the look completely. To do this, I covered this stacked die cut with layers of Hero Art's white satin pearl embossing powder. I did this just like I did before with the clear embossing powder, but this time I used the satin pearl embossing powder, which turns whatever color is underneath it a metallic look. So you can kind of see the colors of cardstock through it, but it has this silvery metallic finish that is just gorgeous. So look at your specialty embossing powders like your glitters. That's great for covering your die cuts too for a new look. In the center, I used this fantastic sentiment from this Gina K design stamp set. There are many beautiful sentiments in here, and they work perfect for a simple card design such as this one, where you want the focus to be on the sentiment. So another way to get more out of your dies and die cuts is to cover them with different mediums to change the look. Okay, now for this example, I wanted to create different colors to peek through the holes of this intricate background. To do this, I started by creating a guide where I can add my color. So I'm using the bottom layer background die, and I'm just temporarily taping it onto the front of my white note card. I'm going to run this through my die cut machine with an embossing mat so it makes an impression, just like I showed you earlier in this video. Now that we have the pattern impressed onto our cardstock, we know where to add the different colors of cardstock, so that we don't have to try to figure it out with paper or peeking through the background dies. So here I'm just coloring in the impressed areas, adding different colors to the pattern, trying to do a rainbow starting with pink on the outside and working my way to blue in the center. It doesn't matter how messy I am, I just want to be sure to cover the impressed areas because that's what will show through. I use Copic markers simply because they're quick for me to use, but you can use any markers for this. So after I've applied color to all the impressed areas, we can add our first layer onto the card. That's the same layer that die that I used to make the impression. So I'm using the strong liquid adhesive on the back of it so that we can be sure it'll stay secure, and glue that right onto the note card. And you'll see the colors peek through the holes nicely. So by making the impression, we know where to add the color, and it saves us a lot of time. Next, I'll add in the circle die in the center so that we have that all covered up. And then I also added all the additional layers. So we have the additional white die cut layers that go on top of the bottom one. I added a few gems into the pattern just for some sparkle, and then added the Thanks Sugar Script die to the center, and that of course is covered with the Shimmer pen and the Tonic Crystal Glaze for dimension. There you can see all the different colors peeking through the holes in the pattern. You could have tried to use different colors of cardstock behind the die cut, but I think that would have taken a lot longer. This next card shares another tip. The tip here is to use a few of the little bits and pieces left over from a die cut and inlay them in to other die cuts. You see those dark color pieces peeking through there? Those are little pieces left over from another die cut, and I just inlaid them into the white. It's a great way to add a tiny bit of color, and since I only did it in certain areas, it didn't take long to do it all. For the focal point of this card, I used a sentiment that I've been wanting to use for a while. It's a beautiful sentiment from this Casual Fridays Supercalifragilistic stamp set. This stamp set has some unique and fun sentiments in it that are very encouraging, and I wanted to be sure to keep the focus on that sentiment. So I kept the background very simple with white die cuts. Now this card shares the tip of using your leftover pieces to create a background. I had lots of leftover pieces that I didn't use on my cards. Instead of letting them go to waste, I just glued them down onto a note card in a fun pattern to cover the background. In the center of one of the circles, I added my sentiment and popped it up so it had a little bit of a dimension to make it stand out a bit. That love is from the Birch Press Love Sugar Script die, and the To You is from this Birch Press Time to Celebrate stamp set. Again, I looked through my stamp sets to find that To You message, and I just cut the little sentiment stamp so that I could stamp that alone. Now, I will say that I had a few other cards that I created that I'm going to skip in this video because it's so long enough as is, but you can go to my blog to see the additional cards. This is one of them. I just had pieces left over and decided to throw them together. I was able to make a ton of cards this day using all these dies, and it was so much fun. But before I go, I wanted to show you a trick that I've been doing lately that I have found super helpful. I have an 8x10 acrylic frame that stands right at the top of my work surface, right above the camera frame here. On this acrylic frame, I have put a piece of magnetic paper on half of it, and this is where I stick my dies and my stamps while I'm creating, so I don't lose them on my work surface. I will link below to the frame that I use. I find this so handy in containing all of my important pieces when I'm creating. Okay, there you have a long video with a ton of cards. Once again, I'm hoping these random die cutting tips were helpful. I really just wanted to use these dies and decided to share them in a video. If you are interested in any of the supplies, I link most of them below in the YouTube description. But on my blog, I have more linked resources, more photos of cards, and more information. In the middle are a couple other die cutting videos that might be helpful to you. I appreciate you spending this long amount of time with me for this crafting episode, and I hope to see you again soon.